This occurred in 2017 and is 100% true. My family flew across the country to visit me in LA, where I lived. I thought it would be a nice visit to Catalina Island. When we arrived, it became apparent to us that it was the off-season. It was late November, the weather was cold, and as a result, the island was nearly empty besides locals and a few straggling tourists, such as ourselves. Our first priority was to ditch our luggage so we could explore the island, so we immediately checked into our motel, though that word hardly does the place justice. I call it a motel because all the doors to the rooms exited to the outside, but in actuality, our room was one of the 20 to 30 quaint guest house looking buildings arranged in a sort of a horseshoe shape around a walkway, with rooms on either side of the path. The entrance to the motel was essentially one of the points of the horseshoe, and if you walked dead straight, you'd reach the room we were given, essentially on the corner before you have to go right to go further into the horseshoe. So from our room, one path led to the street, the other further into the secluded maze of rooms. After a day of exploring and having just finished dinner, it was time for the cold, dark walk back to the room. Catalina Island is a decent distance from the mainland, and let me just say, it gets dark. Similarly dark was my headspace after the dinner conversation took a left-hand turn, and my overwhelming depression got the best of me. I pulled my black hoodie tighter over my freezing ears and walked ahead of my parents to the hotel room, telling them I just need to go to sleep. And I did immediately. Depression sometimes makes that easy. I was already losing consciousness as they entered after me, drifting off without so much as a good night. I then woke up to my mom saying my name, a harsh whisper. The room had 2 beds. My parents' bed is closer to the door and mine is further in the room. My mom's voice cut through the silence again. She sounded concerned for me. I didn't blame her considering my mental state at the time. Groggy, I rolled over. "What?" I asked. As my eyes adjusted to the dim moonlight coming into the curtains, I saw her turn to face me. She was surprised to see me in my bed. Her eyes got wide. If I'm in my bed, who was she talking to? We both looked back to where she was previously looking to see a hooded figure in all black standing over their bed. Life isn't like the movies, where characters unleash a blood-curdling scream. Sometimes the only thing that comes out is something panicked and guttural. My mom's words became low and severe as she said my dad's name in a dire voice I've never heard her use before. Then the hooded figure did something so bizarre and unsettling. It didn't advance towards us, but instead, crouched in the corner near where it stood. The way it crouched was so absolutely unexpected, even in regard to this already unexpected situation, that it terrified me. It seemed animalistic. I knew 2 things. The hooded figure had been standing over us sleeping, and it's not acting in any sort of way that I can understand. As opposed to the infinite moment of this figure standing over us mere seconds ago, the series of events that unfolded when my hulking ex-military dad woke up happened in an instant. Suddenly, we were out of the door, not knowing which way the intruder went. My mom was screaming, "Get him! Get him!" My dad was running down one path of the horseshoe, further into the hotel, shouting through the sheer adrenaline, "I'm going to frickin' kill you!" I ran down the other path towards the street. When I got there, not a sign of the intruder, but it became suspiciously quiet behind me. I ran back to the room to find my dad quietly walking back, his head low. He gets really close to me and I hear him say, "It's a kid." The explanation: some young teen, tall and lanky as I am in my 20s, wearing all black, including a black hoodie, went into the wrong room. Our room. The one time my parents just so happened to forget to lock the door. My mom woke up when he entered, and seeing a tall person in a black hoodie, she thought he was me, assumedly leaving the room in a depressive episode. And when the hooded figure crouched, that was him realizing his mistake and panicking. He was scared of us. As I got back to the room, my mom walked out and hugged this kid, who was now crying his eyes out. I probably would be too if a massive ex-soldier was sprinting after me, with murder in his eyes. This happened when I was about 13 years old, and I still think about it today. My friend Jackie and I were extremely mischievous children. We loved joking around, sometimes using extreme measures to pull the best pranks. I can remember climbing a neighbor's tree with her and devising a rope and pulley system with a basket and water balloons to get the balloons to the top of the tree so that we could throw them at the neighborhood boys without being detected or retaliated against. Sometimes we would do mildly dangerous things to get a good rush, but it was never serious, just harmless messing around. One night, Jackie came over for a sleepover. We ate a bunch of candy and talked about boys, and then we got bored. It was around 1 in the morning and we were hyped off of the sugar, so we couldn't sleep. One of us mentioned that we wished our other friend Bailey was there to hang out with. And then I got the most brilliant idea of the evening. The two of us should sneak out of my house, walk over to Bailey's, and then TP her front tree. Now, for those of you that don't know what TPing is, it means toilet papering. You know how the douchey frat boys in college sometimes throw toilet paper all over their fraternity houses to show dominance or manliness or just plain stupidity? That's what I wanted to do. She, of course, thought it was a brilliant idea. So we stuffed a bunch of rolls of toilet paper into 2 large purses, put on some sneakers, and then sneaked downstairs and out my back door. It was a summer night, so not too cold, which was good because we were wearing tank tops and PJ shorts. The walk through her house was half through neighborhoods and half through a long stretch of road next to a golf course with a neighborhood at the very end of it. Bailey's house was a little under a mile away, so we began hustling so that we could get there faster and maybe tap on her window and get her to hang out if she wasn't asleep. We began walking, at first nervous that my parents would catch us, and then confident that they wouldn't. We began giggling and talking about boys again. Now, I'm sure that most people reading or listening to this will think we were very stupid, and we were, but you have to understand the context of the situation. My hometown is very quiet. Nobody goes outside after 8 o'clock at night. It was ranked in the top 5 safest cities in the United States. Nothing bad happens there, or nothing that we knew about at that age. We had, up until that point, thankfully never had the opportunity to be afraid of walking alone or at night growing up. So with that in mind, we figured we had nothing to worry about. We kept chattering on as we crossed the residential area into the golf course and didn't miss a beat in doing so. Suddenly, an SUV lazily rode up going the opposite way of us. I can still remember it like it happened a few minutes ago instead of years. The SUV was large, red, and 4-doored, with a middle-aged man driving. He slowed down as he approached us and rolled down his windows. "Hey girlies, what are you doing up so late at night?" He had a huge mouth with perfect straight white teeth, and he would have been handsome if he hadn't been so strange. "Nothing." He raised his eyebrows at that. "Nothing? All by yourselves? Well, that's dangerous." He smiled again, this time even wider, and I could, for the first time in my life, feel fear ripple through me like a wave. We were walking to my dad's house. He's waiting for us. Silence crept between the car and us. I had lied. He knew I lied. He looked at me, then at Jackie. For a minute, I actually convinced myself that maybe he was just a very, very creepy, nosy neighbor. But there was something so wrong with him. He took his time replying, twisting the words around his mouth like he was tying a cherry stem into a knot. "That's interesting. You're so young to be allowed out so late wearing that. You better hurry home to him before it's too late." The air stood still. The only thing keeping me from bolting was Jackie by my side. I couldn't see her face because I was locking eyes with the smiling man, so I wasn't sure if she heard what I heard too. "You better hurry before it's too late." Too late? Too late at night? Or too late for what? I didn't want to know, and I was certain that if we somehow were separated, things would go very, very badly. I thought quickly. He was on the other side of the road. He would have to go a distance to get us. I tore my eyes from his and risked a quick glance at Jackie, and Jackie wasn't moving either. She was looking at me with wide eyes, as if I knew what to do, so I pretended I did. "Thank you, sir. Have a good night." I grabbed Jackie's hand and marched down the sidewalk away from him in what I hoped was a confident way. His SUV lingered behind us, unmoving. We kept walking, gripping hands covered in sweat together as if it was the only thing keeping us from certain death. And then we heard clack, clack, clack. Our footsteps made empty, hollow noises down the deserted sidewalk. My ears were in sonar mode, listening for something. Anything. Car door opening, a man's voice, but I refused to turn around and give him the satisfaction of knowing I was afraid. I didn't want him to know we were. Suddenly, a car screeched into gear and we heard him peel down the asphalt. We started running, and as we ran, we both looked behind our shoulders. He had driven off the opposite way, away from us. We didn't slow down. Eventually, we could see where the edge of the golf course ended and, in the distance, where a sleepy neighborhood of houses began. It was a ways away, but it symbolized safety to us, so we slowed down. We walked in tense silence for a while. I looked at Jackie's face, and her jaw was clenched. She looked at me. "That guy." "Yeah? What do you think he wanted?" "You know what he wanted." "Yeah, I was hoping you would say you knew him." "No." Then we heard it. The clack, clack, clack sound and screech. The sound of a car booking it down the road came from behind us. We both turned at the same time to see this man in the red SUV, now on our side of the road, coming straight at us. Neither of us moved. I think we were paralyzed with fear. He jerked to a stop next to us and began to get out of the car. "Run!" I shouted, and we tore down the sidewalk towards the houses. The smiling man started shouting something at us, but I couldn't catch what he was saying, and I wasn't about to turn around and try to find out. The houses were getting closer, but he had gone back into his SUV and was following us, shouting things out of the window. There was a corner coming up, and we heard the SUV stop, and then him get out and start running after us. "That way," Jackie screamed. We turned the corner into the neighborhood, but there was nowhere to go. It was 1 in the morning. Nobody was awake. We didn't know any of the people who lived in these houses, and by the time someone woke up to open the door, he would for sure catch us. But the first house on the street had a low fence. I pointed to it and didn't even have to say a word to her. We both hopped it and tumbled into a stranger's backyard. They had a dog. Luckily, it didn't attack us. Unluckily, it began barking. We sprinted across the yard and quickly hopped their fence into the neighboring yard, which didn't have a dog, and hid behind a bush and a temporary pool in the back. Dog in the yard over kept barking. From a hole in the bush, we could see through the wrought iron fence out into the street. Nothing. Then a voice. "I know you are here, girlies." We could hear him walking around but couldn't see him. A gate rustled and the neighbor's dog barked even louder. He was looking for us in the first yard that we had gone into. He said something else, but we couldn't understand him, and then we didn't hear from him for a long time. A shadow appeared through the iron fence. The neighbor's dog. It had been let out of its backyard and had wandered past the one we were in. For all we knew, he knew exactly where we were and was playing with us, so we didn't move. We sat silently in the bush for hours. As the night began to fade and the early morning sun began to frame the edge of the hills, still dark but less so, we heard an engine rev. In horror, we watched the man in the red SUV drive slowly by through the fence in the yard we were hiding in. His face set, turning, searching, still looking. And in that moment, I knew why he had driven away the first time. He was giving us a head start. He was hunting us, and he didn't want the prey to go down too easy. It would have ruined his game. We sat in that bush until around 6:30 in the morning when it was fully light out. And then we ran back to my place to hop in bed before my parents woke up. When we got to my house, I realized we still had all the toilet paper we had stolen from my kitchen cabinets in my bags. "Jackie, since we never TP'd Bailey's house, let's TP mine. It has a better tree. Besides, my parents will never suspect it was us because who the heck TPs their own house?" It was true. The tree outside of my parents' house is a truly magnificent maple tree, and my parents would never guess that we were the culprits. But that's not why I wanted to TP it. I wanted to release all the tension from the night before and relax again. I wanted to pretend that we were not almost kidnapped in the middle of the night, without anyone knowing where we were or why we had disappeared out of our beds without a trace. I wanted to feel like a kid again. "Yeah, let's do it." So we completely wrapped my enormous tree in toilet paper, throwing roll after roll up and around, and then hosing the entire thing for good measure so it would be harder to get out, more authentic. And then crept up the stairs and fell asleep, exhausted in my bed. Approximately half an hour later, my mom burst into my room screaming, "Someone TP'd our house." And that was the end of our sleep because my mom was sure that one of your annoying little friends did this and thought it was funny, and we need to combine a family effort to get it off because the assholes used our house and sprayed it down. Jackie immediately remembered a mysterious obligation to babysit for her brothers on a Saturday morning, and she had to go do it or else her mom would get mad, and so I was stuck with my irate family, combing through wet maple leaves and sopping wet, disgusting toilet paper through the afternoon. I learned 2 lessons that day. 1, do not TP your own house, for many obvious reasons. 2, do not walk anywhere at night with friends or alone, to pull a prank or to go on a run. Do not go, because you never know who might be out there waiting for an opportunity to hunt. This occurred when my son was 4 years old. This time, I am 100% sure that my kid prevented something horrible from happening to me. It turned into an episode of Law & Order with a terrifying ending. By way of background, I live in Milwaukee, which was the honor of being the most racially segregated city in the country. It's a cool city overall, but we have a really shitty inner city with a ton of poverty, violence, and gang activity. At the time this happened, I was living in a sort of in-between area. Not the hood, but not a super nice area either. I was a 22-year-old single mom. I lived in a ground floor apartment on one of the main streets. I parked in the back alley behind the building. My front door faced the street, and I had a side door too, with a walk running between my building and the one next door. Anyway, I got home in the middle of the afternoon on a Saturday with my kid. As we drove down the alley to get to my parking spot, I saw a guy in a hoodie sort of lurking around by my parking spot. It was weird because it was warm outside and he had his hood up, but there were a bunch of gangster wannabe kids in the neighborhood, so whatever. It was definitely an odd place to just be standing though. As I got close to the building and started pulling into my parking spot, he turned around and started walking toward the street, past my side door. He definitely left because I arrived. I figured he was smoking a blunt or something. I didn't think anything of it, and I got my son and some bags out of the car. I went the same way the guy had just taken to my side door. I didn't see him at all. My son and I went inside, and I was in the process of putting stuff down when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I immediately thought it was this guy. Being young and naive, I answered the front door. It was the same guy, still with his hood up. He immediately smiled at me, but not in a super friendly way, more of a leer. He looked to be about 16, with a fake gold grill that was studded with little fake diamonds. I regretted opening the door, but here I was, so I went with it. Hi. He kept staring at me and said nothing. At this point, I saw another kid in a hoodie pacing behind him on the sidewalk and looking at us. I was quickly realizing that this was not a good situation. My son, who I had momentarily forgotten about, came up behind me. He did the shy kid thing where he stood behind me and poked his head out from behind my butt to look at the guy. The hoodie dude looked at him for a good couple of seconds and then back at me. Yo, is Daniel around? I don't know who that is, maybe try the other door. I gestured to my neighbor's door to my left. Are you sure? Yeah, sorry. And he left, walking the opposite direction of my neighbor's door. Hoodie dude number 2 followed him. I thought it was really weird that I didn't even try to check the next door for Daniel. I thought the whole thing was really weird. My boyfriend got to my apartment a few minutes later and I was glad to see him. He had a really old Jeep that he always parked out front on the main street. When he went out to get something from his car shortly after he arrived, it was gone. What the heck? Car theft was a pretty common thing in this neighborhood, but stealing it from the main street in broad daylight was pretty ballsy. So we called the cops. Filed a report, the whole 9. I told the cop about the hoodie dude since it seemed like it could be important. I was able to give a good description of the guy who came to my door asking for Daniel. I had no idea if it was relevant, but the fact that the Jeep was stolen so shortly after these guys were around seemed pretty relevant. That's where the story ended, until 2 days later. I got a call from a different cop with the downtown main precinct. He told me they had found the Jeep and, other than the ignition, it wasn't damaged. Yay. He asked if I could come downtown to do a lineup to see if I could identify the people who had knocked on my door the night before the Jeep got taken. That was weird. A lineup for a stolen car? But I agreed. He asked if I could come down in a couple of days. Also weird they wouldn't want me to do it right away, but I was mostly focused on the fact that doing a lineup was pretty cool. So I go to the downtown precinct a couple of days later. The way this went seemed sort of unorthodox, but it was what it was. 2 detectives took me into a dark room where a woman in her 50s was sitting with a young woman in a wheelchair. The young woman's lower legs was in a giant cast with this whole metal contraption surrounding it, with maybe a dozen metal rods going into the cast itself. At this point, I had no idea what the heck was happening. The detectives instructed us that we weren't to say anything during the lineup, except if we wanted the guys to turn around again or whatever, and that we couldn't talk to each other at all. Okay. We ended up having to wait in the room for almost an hour in the dark, awkwardly not speaking. They explained it was taking more time than anticipated to get 12 guys from the jail over to the precinct. Finally, we got started. They did 2 lineups and gave us forms to mark. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. There was a large window in front of us, and they explained that the guys couldn't see us. They turned the lights on in the room behind that window and brought each guy in individually. I couldn't identify anyone in the first lineup. I sort of felt bad actually, but I couldn't. The second lineup started and I didn't recognize guys 1, 2, or 3. Number 4 came out though, and I immediately recognized the dude who had knocked on my door. He didn't have his stupid grill anymore, but it was definitely the guy. After the second lineup was done, they brought the other 2 women into the hallway and told me to stay put. After a few minutes, they came back to get me. The detectives asked if I recognized anyone, and I told them I was sure about number 4 in the second lineup, but couldn't identify anyone in the first. I had gathered by this point that the hoodie dude, number 2, had likely been in the first lineup, but I hadn't gotten a good look at him when he was pacing on the sidewalk. They had me sign 2 forms, one for each lineup, with the second form identifying number 4 as hoodie dude number 1. When I gave the forms back, the detective told me that they could tell me what was actually going on now that the lineup was done. Good, because I was super confused by this point. He explained that number 4 was indeed one of the guys they arrested with my boyfriend's Jeep. The guys had stolen the Jeep and driven to a nearby part of town into a quiet neighborhood. They came across a young couple unloading groceries from their car. The young woman with the leg contraption was the female half of that couple. They parked the stolen Jeep behind the couple, got out, and immediately shot them both. They shot the woman in the leg and shot the young man in the dick. He was still in the hospital in bad condition, which was why he wasn't there. The older woman was the girl's mom and had brought her from the hospital to do the lineup. The reason it was delayed a couple of days was because she had emergency surgery to try to fix the damage to her leg. The guys didn't demand anything from the couple or take anything from them after the shooting. They just immediately shot them. The young woman managed to remember the license plate number of the Jeep, and they were apprehended in a corner store where a cop saw the stolen car parked outside shortly after the shooting. The shooters were both teenagers, but were being charged as adults. One of them had stupidly talked a bit before lawyering up and had told a detective that it was a gang initiation. That was the price of the admission. They had stolen my boyfriend's car after taking the bus out to the street I lived on. They had figured it would be easier to get away if they had wheels. The detectives were pretty sure I had been the original target of opportunity, but couldn't explain why they hadn't gone through with it. Nerves, maybe. I knew why. It was because he saw my kid peeking out from behind me. They told me I might have to testify if the case went to court and told me I'd hear from the DA's office when they needed me. A couple of months later, one of the detectives called me and told me that the hoodie dudes pled out to attempted murder charges in exchange for reduced time. The guy who got shot in the dick survived. I didn't ask how many years, but I assume they're probably still in prison 13 years later. As an ironic postscript to the story, my boyfriend had the same Jeep stolen from the same spot in front of my apartment about 4 months later, also in broad daylight. That time, they didn't find it right away. He was staying over at my house weeks later when he got a call around 2 a.m. from the MPD arson unit. They torched it and left it in the middle of the street in a notoriously violent area of the city. I moved after that. I come from a chaotic upbringing. I was born and raised as a child in South Korea. I later moved to Australia with my mother, having lost my father in a homicide. The next few years of my life in Australia were difficult. Meeting and making friends was quite difficult at that time, particularly since I was quite nerdy and did not speak much English, something most Australian kids at the time did not relate well to. One of my scariest memories was when I was 12. At the time, it didn't even occur to me just how close I came to potentially losing my life. My mother and I were on a road trip, heading south from Melbourne to stay on the southern coast. We had stopped one evening at a small, well-kept caravan park. Caravan park was quaint and beautiful. Neat grass, nice flowers, and a small creek that ran along the edge of the premises. It reminded me of home. I spent some time walking around on my own as my mother was taking a nap. I discovered a game and pool room. I went inside and spent probably a good few hours playing pool by myself and generally just mucking around when a young boy came in. I was very shy and so was he, but we eventually talked for a little while and we became friendly. I do not remember playing any games with him, but I do recall him being pretty nervous. He kept asking me if I wanted to go back to his caravan as his parents were making dinner soon. At first, I was not interested and said no. We spent some more time doing things and talking as it got later. He became more pushy and asked if I liked cake and lollies. Of course, I said. That much I do remember clearly. I followed him to his caravan, which was much older than ours and quite dilapidated. He asked me to wait outside while he talked to his parents. I waited patiently for a few minutes until the door opened, and a larger, older man with glasses and no shirt opened the door and asked if I would like to come inside for cake. I was scared, but I remember feeling like I had to, like it would be rude of me to leave. As I was walking in the door, I heard a man behind me shout out, "Hey, what's going on here?" I was quickly grabbed by the collar of my shirt. Edit. I'm pretty sure it was a dress actually, and pulled inside. The man then quickly tried to lock the door behind me. However, the stranger was too quick and burst in the door. He took my hand abruptly and pulled me outside, and we frantically ran away. The man asked which unit/room or caravan I was in and took me straight there. We went inside and my mom yelled at him, asking why he was there. I was hiding in the corner crying while he explained what happened. We packed back up that night and left immediately. I was already heavily on anxiety medication after what happened back home, and we never spoke about it alone again. My mother claimed it was something I should talk to my therapist about. Every time we all spoke about it, my mother would leave the room. It scared the hell out of her, and I did not really understand why. I guess at that age, it's difficult for the brain to comprehend the reality/potential of the situation. Looking back on it now, utterly scares me to the point of losing sleep. My bedroom has floor-to-ceiling windows that face the backyard. I rarely feel the need to close the curtains because I don't want to shut out my great view. It makes my dogs and cats happy too. And the only way anyone would ever be able to see in is if they're flagrantly trespassing, which I've made difficult to do. My yard is encircled by both a tall fence and a thicket of bushes and trees on both sides of that fence, all on my property. A couple of weeks ago, I pulled into my driveway and was greeted by a woman waiting for me. She claimed she was there out of concern for the neighborhood children. According to her, she and her kids had seen me through my windows, dressed inappropriately, while they were hiking. I told her that wasn't possible because the only way anyone could see into my windows would be through my own backyard, which is far from any hiking trail. She replied with a condescending, "Well, sweetie, I'm sorry, but I have proof." She pulled out her phone and showed me a picture taken of me in my underwear through my window. It was very blurry, but I knew it was me, mostly based on the fact that my hot tub, pool, and garden were in the foreground of the picture. I pointed this out, and the fact that the only way those things could possibly be in the picture was if it had been taken from inside my backyard. I asked her directly if she and her kids had jumped my fence. Instead of giving me a direct answer, she began lecturing me about how inconsiderate it is to be an exhibitionist around children. I explained that I would never exhibit myself in a situation where I thought young children could see me, but I wasn't expecting anyone to trespass in my yard. She ignored the mention of trespassing and launched into a tirade about how she's sure I must be very proud of my body since I've clearly paid enough money for it. I've had breast implants and some skin removal due to weight loss and a few tattoos to cover scars, but that's no excuse to expose myself to children. She ended her smug little tirade by saying, "So, honey, you'll be closing your blinds from now on." I told her that no, I absolutely wouldn't be, because only people on my property could see in the windows and that she and her children were not welcome on my property. She dropped the sweetness and started bitching that the previous owner of my home had been family friends and hadn't locked their gates, and why even have a butterfly garden if kids can't visit? And that it takes them a half an hour to walk to the park unless they go through my yard, and that she'd seen kids at my place before, and why were only she and her children being excluded? At this point I was pissed, so I told her that I locked my gates to keep assholes like her out. She just kept harping on the fact that she's seen other kids at my place, so I told her, those are my nephews who I love, whereas I don't give a single solitary shit about you or your kids. She started scream crying at me like she was possessed. I don't know if you guys remember that insane god warrior lady from the Trading Spouses, but that is the caliber of yelling that this woman in my driveway was doing. I went inside, but she stayed out there for a few minutes, going on and on about being disrespected and how she was going to call the cops because she said I was a pedophile whore making death threats towards her family. A few days afterwards, the psycho returned along with a police officer. She had reported that I was exposing myself to her kids and making threats on her life. I told the officer my side of the story and showed him my backyard so he could see that the crazy lady's photo evidence could have only been taken while trespassing on my property. He had printouts of her evidence, and I'm showing him in the pictures that they had to be taken inside my fence when I realized that the pictures are actually from several different occasions. I'm wearing different garments in some of them. They were taken on several occasions. I pointed this out, and I point out again that all of them had to be taken while trespassing. At this point, it seemed to click with the officer that the lady was batshit, though perhaps he already had an inkling. And he began questioning her about trespassing and taking pictures of me without my consent. He told us both that actually I could pursue charges if I wanted. At this point, she dialed the crazy up, started babbling an insane stream of consciousness that went something like, she actually, another thing, I think I didn't say earlier, but I think she's a prostitute. She's got men over all the time. I saw her, she was in the yard and she was with two men, but not the man who lives with her. Why are they, or who needs to be in that big house without no children? And I mean, she has, those big fake breasts. Stripper. Bimbo, prostitute breasts. How is she affording that? Well, it must be that something's going on in there. Are we taking that into account? This is probable cause. The breasts, I mean, it's probable cause. You know, that's probable cause. I'm not doing it justice, but it went on for at least a full 30 seconds of insane babble ranting while I and the cop just stared at her. When she stopped, the cop essentially said, well, okay, I'll look into that, but right now we're discussing the issue of trespassing, ma'am. And the photographing, miss. My name without her consent. She ignored that and blurted out. She said she didn't care if my children died. The officer looked at me with a raised eyebrow, but told her that's not a crime, and attempted again to redirect to the issues of trespassing and photographing. Once again, she ignored that and asked the officer if he had any kids. He told her he didn't, and she kind of threw up her hands like, oh, well, that's the problem here. The officer assured her that the law doesn't change based on whether a responding officer has kids or not. The cop then asked me what I wanted to do. I said that I wanted to drop the whole thing on the condition that she delete the pictures of me in her phone, and never set foot on my property again. She didn't want to agree to either condition, but ultimately the police officer persuaded her to hand over her phone, and he went through her pictures and deleted them. From all folders, his words, did she have them saved in multiple folders? All the while this lady acts like she's being violated. My second condition was more of a sticking point. This woman did not want to agree to never step foot on my property. She kept diverting the discussion by saying shit like, she has other kids over here all the time, so I don't see the issue. And, well, what if my husband is with the kids? How is he supposed to know? Or if they're with a babysitter? And tearfully, over and over again, I just don't understand what the problem is. Eventually, the officer gave up and just told her that she'd officially been warned, whether she wanted to accept that or not. She started weeping as if someone had slapped her and had to be escorted out of my yard. I thought that would be the end of it, but it's come to my attention that she's going around door to door in the neighborhood, claiming that I'm a pedophilic prostitute and asking people to sign a petition to get me to move. Absolute insanity. So now I'm going to have to figure out how to issue a cease and desist to this bitch. I guess. What a headache.